Well, I think we'll start.
Okay.
So, as I say, very, very warm welcome to you. We've got an hour with Alex Taylor from Harrison Catering, and we're really going to dig into what they've been doing in Harrison Catering with Everything Disc, and also how Alex has experienced training with the tool. So let's get started, Alex.
Okay.
And let's just hear from you, first of all, about the organisation,
Okay.
first of all.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Really pleased to be here. So as Julie has rightly said, I'm Alex Taylor and I work for Harrison Catering Services. We are a medium-sized family-owned business who specialise in contract catering across the predominantly education sector, but we have a number of sites that we operate in for businesses and industry sites as well. So we have an eclectic mix of clients that we offer catering services to, and we work across the UK, and we've got about 2,000 staff. So yeah, the catering teams on site deliver fresh, healthy, nutritious food to the students and employees that we serve, and we're really pleased to be able to deliver a really high quality service to our clients.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alex. Making us all feel hungry thinking about that fresh quality
thinking about
food.
lunchtime.
Yeah, I know. So Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself. A little bit about your background.
So I've been working in learning and talent development now for about 20 years. Before that, I started off in retail, worked in sales, then moved into management. But also always felt that working with people and seeing people grow and develop and be better at what they do was the thing that I got most. I got the biggest kick from seeing people develop themselves. So I decided to specialise in training and moved into a training role within the company that I worked for, Dixon's Group. And then decided to spread my wings a bit and really specialise in learning and development. So got a national role in a specialist retailer, and really sort of honed my skills, and then decided to take a bit of a career change and move into catering about 5 years ago with Harrison. So I head up learning and development for our business. Don't have a direct team, so I have some indirect reports, but I work really closely with our HR team and my manager, Paul Biddle, who I know you've met when we came along to do our training. So yeah, we're a small, tight-knit team, but we are on the ground making things happen. And that's one of the reasons why DISC was a good solution for us, because we needed something that we could really run with and make a difference straight away.
Fabulous. So that's like a Radio 4 link to my next question.
As though it was planned.
It's very planned, which is about your journey with DISC, Alex. So tell us about that. Where did that start?
So about 2 years ago, I was tasked with looking at some development that we could do with our senior teams, our operations teams and our head office teams, that would help people understand themselves and their own behaviour and how they approach situations and relationships, and seeing how we could support our leaders to be better at what they do, whether that's the interactions that they have with their teams around them, and more importantly with their clients, and the really making sure that our accounts are getting the best attention that they can have. And so I looked at some other models, looked at things like Myers-Briggs, looked at SDI and so on. But I was really intrigued with DISC, because when I looked into it and looked at how it could be used and the simplicity of the model, but actually that it was sort of entwined in real practical behaviours that you could see and feel in yourself and in what you do, it just made sense to explore that in a bit more detail, and that's where I made contact with yourself and started the journey.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. If I can just take a little step back to that decision to start exploring a tool, was there anything in particular that that prompted that?
I'd been on a journey. So I've been with the company for about 5 years and was really focused on looking at the skills and capability of our frontline managers, and whether that's first line managers or people in key management roles within the sites that we operate. And so I'd put in place development programs to support those and to support the succession. And it was really about catching up our senior teams and involving them in the process, so that we had a full career journey for our people, but we were also servicing people at the top of the organisation and lower down the organisation. So it was more about just sort of aligning everybody into some form of development that would support the business going forward.
Yeah, lovely. So so you liked the look of DISC.
Yes.
You liked the simplicity of it. So what did you do next?
So I made contact with yourself. We had a look at some of the resources. So it was great to have the sample reports. It was great to have some background on how the profile system works and where it can be used most effectively. But what was also really interesting was when we started looking at the different layers of how DISC could be used with our senior teams and our senior management teams, and the context of work of leaders, which is a profile report aimed really at our senior teams, our people that are leading and creating the vision for our sectors. But also there was the DISC management profile, which was a report that could be used with our sort of junior managers and our frontline managers on the ground. But also within our business development team as well, we found DISC could support those guys within the sales model. So it was great to have a solution that was joined up across all of our different layers of management and leadership, but had a commonality, a common language. And that was important from a cultural perspective, that we wanted people to be able to connect and understand each other right across the business to support those effective working relationships and drive growth and retention of our accounts. So that was, I think that was where that came.
Yeah, lovely. So you like the fact that we've got topic specific profiles, and but the consistent theme running through all of it is DISC, and being able to build that common language.
Definitely.
So what was the next step once you'd sort of decided this is the tool that we'd like to take further?
So Paul and I worked on a proposal which we submitted to the board. Within that proposal, we looked at what DISC could do for us in terms of supporting our management capability and helping people understand themselves. So we looked at some outcomes, some behavioural outcomes that were going to be consistent with our values, with the company, with what the company was aiming to achieve as well. So we were able to draw some nice links back to the fact that we could use different profiles with different levels. We could have everybody connecting and understanding each other at a far deeper level, and understanding themselves, which was important to us, because sometimes we have our blind spots and we don't pay a lot of attention to what we do and how we do it. And we felt that giving people that profile, which is theirs to keep, which is theirs to reflect on and to use going forward, was a nice way to do some development, rather than a subject area for the day and it's forgotten tomorrow. So I think being able to join all of those lines together and submit the proposal to the board, which Paul did for us, and it was important to get their buy-in right at the front, so that we could go with the full support of the company, that this was the way forward. Yeah.
And how easy was it to get that buy-in? I mean, I know that you will have done a very thorough job with that proposal. Yeah. I also remember that it took, and we were saying earlier that between ourselves, that we were remembering it took about 3 months. So I was kind of thinking, what was the How was that received by the board? What was their
So
initial reaction to the proposal?
So in terms of how we work as a business, we are careful, we are methodical, we think things through, we look at the potential outcomes and look at the impact of what we're doing and why we're doing it and where it's going to really add value. And this was no different in terms of the approach. So the submission was made, the board then takes some time to review that and come back at the next board meeting with questions, which were then fielded. I think that there was a real appetite for this model because of its ease of use. It's I think the way that the profiles were laid out were really nice. That it gives you real specific behaviours that you can focus on, or that you can do more of or less of. And being able to draw those out and bring links back to practical application in the workplace. And that was more of the questions that we had. How is this going to make a difference in the workplace? So we were able to draw some of those examples out and demonstrate that benefit.
Yeah.
I think it's really difficult because you've got to set out with the end in mind, and whilst return on investment is a key topic for any L&D professional or HR professional out there, it's difficult to quantify in pound notes the return on investment. So we talk about return on expectation in our business.
I like
that. We look at well, what do we expect to see, hear, or feel as a result of this? And again, setting out at the beginning, we wanted it to be a cultural change for the business, that people had a common language to speak, a common way of understanding each other, and some of the differences that may well have resulted in conflict previously could be a source of discussion and debate for people. And I know we'll come on to it later on, but it's really nice to be able to reflect on those objectives that we had at the beginning, to then be able to sit back and think, actually, we are getting some traction on people just talking in a disc language, and you're a bit more D than I am, or there's a bit more S there where maybe I should be a bit more D. So I think that it's lovely to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you. So the board had a look at it, and and they were carefully considering it, and then they made their decision.
Yeah. So then it was all systems go, and it was looking at first of all what our plan was. So we scoped out a plan to roll out through 2017 across all of our senior ops roles. So whilst we were doing the planning and looking at practically how that would work, because in our business it's difficult to get our operators together for sessions, so we had to take quite a pragmatic approach to the implementation of the plan. But before that, we had to get trained. So I had to get certificated, and Paul and myself came along to one of your certification days, where we really got so much from that, and that gave me the inspiration that it really was the right solution for us. And then we put the plan into place, and over the course of last year we rolled it out and had some really good impact.
Lovely, thank you. So can you just talk us through that rollout? How did that work? I know you were incredibly busy. What did you actually do?
Well, we invested. So once we'd attended the session, we'd invested in the packs, because as I mentioned earlier, there's only myself and Paul in terms of the delivery for the program.
So when you're talking about the packs that you invested in, am I right? You're talking about the training facilitation kits.
Yes.
Yeah. So which ones did you purchase?
So we purchased the work of leaders, the management, and the sales initially, because we wanted to focus on our senior ops guys, our senior leadership teams, and our junior operations managers, who would be responsible for multi-sites within a geographical area. Bye-bye.
Fabulous. So if I can just say to anybody who's listening in and thinking, I don't know anything about these packs or
Yeah.
these kits, these are training facilitation kits that Wiley have put together, and they've got all of the training materials that you would need to be able to deliver a training program. Everything comes on a USB stick,
Yeah.
and it's got the PowerPoints, it's got the embedded video, it's got the trainer's notes, very, very comprehensive trainer's notes, participants, handouts, materials. It really is a training course in a box or on a USB stick.
Yeah, it's a one-stop shop, and that was invaluable to supporting our rollout, because if I'd had to have developed the material behind each training session that we were going to work with, it would have required a lot of extra resource and a lot of extra time, which in terms of my day-to-day activity, it just probably wouldn't have had enough time to do that. So I think the quality of our delivery may have been compromised if I hadn't been able to do that. So having those packs, I was able to make the tweaks to the PowerPoint. So the Work of Leaders has about 140 PowerPoint slides in there. And some of them are not necessarily relevant. And when you look through about in terms of how you think that's going to impact with your people, with your target audience, with your company's way of working and your company culture, there's some of those that don't need to be done, or you might you might focus on a particular area. So yeah, we chopped and changed a little bit. We worked with some of the videos, not all of them, but with the focus that structure and that resource was our start point. Having the handout packs, having the trainers' notes, we were able to edit and adapt these with our own company logos and things like that. So it was very much delivered as though it was a Harrison program, which was important for us to reinforce that it was Harrison that was doing this.
Yeah, so it's lovely that they are all customizable, and that you customize them. You took out some of the PowerPoints and you scaled them down so that they were absolutely right for your company and your company culture.
Absolutely.
And, so can you just talk us through, I know that there will be some people listening who haven't done a training yet, and I know that you've been on an incredible journey over the last year delivering, and we were sort of pondering on your own development as you've trained. So what was it like, that first training that you delivered?
It was very nerve-wracking. So even though I'd been in training and development for a number of years, that first session is still a very nervous time. But I do think that having had the opportunity to review the resources available and to come back to the training day that I'd had with yourselves, having Paul there, that we were both going through this together was a brilliant way to join up and make sure that we were aligned to what we were trying to do, and we were supportive for each other. Having your support in the background was brilliant as well. So being able to, when I was making some tweaks, I can see Tony's asked a question there. I think the tweaks were straightforward, but it was having
moved on, he says.
Yeah, I know, but actually it was having that ability to ask you some questions about what I was doing and how I was doing it. So having your support in the background was really, really important too. But I think that what we did agree to do, and what was really helpful, was to do a dummy run with our own team. So when we came back from our training day, within a week, we had set up our own team to do workplace profiles, which is another profiling profile available with DISC. And we'd done the carpet exercise, which I know we'll talk about in a moment. But we'd literally worked through some of the things that we were going to do on our actual training days with our own team. And again, I was able to get feedback from the team, which was really helpful to get me into as good a place as possible for when I went live with the people that matter. Not that our team doesn't matter. I think I might be on the call here. So yeah.
Yeah. So when you went live with people who weren't in your team,
yeah,
obviously you needed to feel as confident as possible and to know that that you knew your stuff. And so thank you for sharing. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but nevertheless you've done a lot of preparation to make sure that you were in the best possible place.
Yeah.
And so as you started to roll out the program, I know that some people have asked about, some people have concerns about the more skeptical people that you might have in the room with a DISC training, and how you managed skepticism, challenges, questions, because like with any training, you're going to get people coming along who maybe haven't bought into it.
Yeah.
You don't know why you're doing it. They might even just think, oh, psychometrics, waste of time.
Yeah.
So I just wonder how you experienced that and how you responded.
Well, what we did first of all was we engaged with the sector leads, so the sector directors who were responsible for the key delegates who were coming into that first session. So engaged with those leaders and got them bought in to the process, to what it was, why we were doing it, and what was important. So we'd gone through a mini process as we'd done with the board previously. What was great about that was that one of the sector leads had already done DISC with a previous organisation, so was bought into the concept and was really supportive of what we were trying to do. And that was great to have an ally, because those sector leads were invited to that first session along with the delegates, so that it was a real team experience, and that everybody was in it together. So having done those things, I think we headed off a lot of skepticism or things of, well, why are we doing this, and what's the point, and what's the benefit, because they were able to prepare the learners for that session. So those pre-learning, pre-session discussions, identifying the reasons why it was important for the delegates to engage and what they were going to really get from it, headed a lot of that off. And then finally, that you will always get skeptical people, and I felt that it was more a reflection of their style than them being particularly negative about the process or the system. And actually, we're all individuals, we're all human, and we don't just fit nicely into one of the boxes. Even, we might resonate with 90% of what's said in our profile report, and it's okay that there's 10% that we don't resonate with, because we wouldn't be who we are if we were, if we looked at it exactly. So it helped, coming from a point where I knew that there might be some challenge, but being able to facilitate that nicely in the right way, to throw some questions back to help people look at it differently or look at their behavior differently. And also then having that profile report to be able to go back after the event, and for people to reflect on further. And as we looked to embed DISC within our organisation and in our culture, it was a really nice way to overcome some of those challenges.
Yeah.
So we only had one or two people who were adamant that their profile was not a true reflection of them, but I think that once we'd had those kinds of discussions, they were more open to the fact that actually it was probably more their understanding of themselves than actually the profile being incorrect.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, isn't it? That it is very, very rare for people to look at their profile and for it not to really resonate with them. Yeah. Very rare. Yeah. And if it does happen, as you say, there's usually a reason for that.
Yes.
And it's about the coaching conversation you have. It's about digging in to understand what was the situation when they were completing the questionnaire. That's one of them. Are they in a time of transition? That's another one. And as you say, sometimes people have got blind spots, and it's useful to say, well, I'm not sure I'm like this, but let me hear from other people as to whether or not they feel that I'm like this. So it can start to open up some useful conversations.
It can, and also in the training, whilst it can feel a little bit heavy with, there's lots of information for you to go through. What's really great with the sessions is they're structured in such a way that there's a lot of facilitation, there's a lot of activity, there's breakouts, there's an opportunity for people to talk to each other and share about them with their colleagues, some of their thoughts. So I might read it and think, oh, that's not like me. But then when I sit and share with my colleague, and the colleague says, well, hang on a second, when we were in that meeting, or when I came along and did a site visit with you, then this is, I did see that. So it actually, that facilitative and activity-based approach helped people understand themselves more. So by the end of the day, they were really tuned in to what they'd learned about themselves and how they could use that productively in the future. So coming back to Tony's question there, did it go down well with the people on that first training? It was brilliant. Our feedback was amazing, and it continued to be, because people felt as though they'd learned something. I think with adult learning, coming back to helping people understand the reasons why they're there and what they're going to get from it and how it's going to practically make a difference to them is some of the core principles of adult learning. So the fact that it was really tuned to them, and it wasn't just a bland subject area of, right, let's do a session on change management. It's really all about them. And I think if you make the session like that, you do get the buy-in, and our feedback was brilliant. So.
Fabulous. It is invaluable, isn't it? Because people realise this is about me as a person.
Yes.
So yes, it's going to make me approach leadership in a new way. It's going to make me a better person in this organisation. But it's also going to help me in all areas of my life.
Without doubt.
It's about me, and it's about how I build relationships with people and how I communicate. So I think the payoff for people is great, and they get that pretty quickly, don't they? It's like, oh yes, this is fun because it's about me.
Yeah, and I think that once you have that first one, that then gives you the confidence as the facilitator. So there might be things that you reflect on and think you could have done differently, or you look at an activity and think, oh, that didn't quite hit, or that was great, I'm going to do more of that next time. And so as long as you go through that process, and as I said, it was really helpful having Paul alongside me so that we were able to bounce off each other and learn from each other. So to get that feedback firsthand has helped us shape what we do with the sessions now. So we do those sessions slightly differently, but every day is a learning day when we do it. So it's great.
And what would you say? This is sort of putting you on the spot, I know, but you've tweaked them as you've gone along. What would you say the main things are that you've changed as you become more experienced? Had more knowledge about DISC.
I would say that I wouldn't say I've changed an awful lot, but I will look at who's coming and what their roles are in the organisation, and we'll look at the activities and tweak the pitch of the activity, or tweak the wording of the activity so it is more aimed at them and what they do, so that we're really making sure that it's coming back into business outcomes as well as personal outcomes. So I think that's, for us, it's getting that pitch right with business.
Yeah. So making everything really relevant to the business, at the same time acknowledging that people are getting benefits outside of work. There's a great question here from Michaela, which is about keeping DISC alive, and that is such an important one. As we know with any training, that the really important part is, how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep this alive beyond the training itself? So can you just talk through what you've done, what you've used to keep this very much alive in people's minds?
So the first thing we did was to roll it out through all of the key people in the organisation. Then it was about having conversations with people, but drawing DISC back into that conversation. So at our operations meetings, where we gather all the ops teams together to talk about how we're doing and where we're going, and those key sort of strategy meetings, it's bringing DISC into some of the conversation there. So it is being referenced and reinforced. I think it's also about finding ways to have it underpin other elements of learning, or other elements of the way we work. So within our company, we have our 5 fundamentals, which are our company values. So our values of family, respect, honesty, pride, and exceptional. And so when we're talking about how people are displaying those behaviours and those values, it's drawing a link back to DISC with reference to that, and we've also looked at how we can bring it into our appraisal process to have examples of where DISC has made a difference to either the KPI outcomes, the key performance indicators that have been set for that year ahead, or how they've supported people with the 5 fundamentals. So it's drawing DISC into other areas of our practice and our culture, which has helped us embed it. In fact, at one of our recent ops meetings, there was some discussion about account retention and what we're doing to drive account retention, and making sure that we're doing everything we can. And one of the ops managers mentioned about DISC and how that had helped with client relationships on their patch of business, and actually, rather than an account going out for a retender, because of how this manager had adapted their approach since going through DISC, that account had signed up for an extension. So I think there are a number of ways. If you have got that, if you've got that drive and determination and desire that it's the right thing to do, and you're role modeling it as a team, so as a facilitation team and a team that's owning the project, we felt that there is just that energy behind it. And finally, a great way to embed and use and keep DISC alive is to use it in another context, which we've used 5 behaviours of a cohesive team.
So we're going to talk about 5 behaviours in a minute, Alex. And I'm excited to do so because I know you've really enjoyed running that program.
Yeah.
Just keep it to DISC. I also want to ask you, I think in terms of keeping it alive, that I know that you've used comparison reports, and the other one is myeverythingdisc.com.
Yeah.
And those really are, I mean, for people who aren't familiar with this, these really are designed to keep DISC alive. Absolutely. So if I can just explain to people and then hear how you used it. myeverythingdisc.com is something that you can enable your participants to have. Every single participant can have their own, it's almost like a mini website, and it's got their DISC profile on there, information about DISC, research information, a podcast about their style, and also the ability to be able to invite other people to do the comparison report. And the comparison reports, which are all free, are the opportunity for people to to compare their style with other people's style or another person's style, and look at similarities and differences and how they can work better together. So that's just a little bit of an overview of that.
Yeah.
So, Alex, how have you used comparison reports in myeverythingdisc.com?
So we don't enable myeverythingdisc at the beginning of the process. So when we invite someone to take the assessment and come along to the development days set up for their particular level, we do the process. We then go through the profiling report and do the training with them, and then we enable myeverythingdisc after that, so that people then have that point of reference ongoing. With comparison reports, it's something that we've done a couple of times, and it's something that's there in the background if there is, for us, if there is a need to use it, but we haven't felt there's been a need to use it as yet. So we've not.
I love the way that you've integrated DISC into other processes, other like your values,
yes.
Other ways of of behaving in Harrison. I just love the way that you've set out to integrate it. So coming back to Michaela's question, it's always useful to be thinking about, how am I going to keep this alive right at the start and build in those processes. That's brilliant. One other thing that I know you've done is invest in some collateral.
We certainly have. Yeah, I've got one here.
Yes, so the pens.
A disc pen. We've also, so every time we do a session, we will have on the tables and chairs, we'll have the disc pen. We have a disc mug that we give to everybody. So there's a disc mug. We use the disc carpet, which if you get to go and visit Tony and Julie to do a training day with them, you'll see how the carpet works. But we find that's really great to set off the day in an active way. So rather than sit down and look at a video about how disc works, we'll facilitate an exercise where you ask people some questions about themselves and how they've behaved recently, and map them into the carpet, using the carpet as a vehicle to do that. And they end up somewhere on the disc model, and we then reference that back. So we put a little post-it note on the carpet where they ended up. We then give them their profile report, and we go back to the carpet to see where they are. And that's been a really well received way of kicking off the day.
Yeah, what a great way of doing it, putting the post-it note there, and then coming back with the profile, going back to the carpet and saying, actually my dots here. That's fabulous.
We got the posters for Work of Leaders. So in Work of Leaders, you've got a whole leadership model, which has been developed by Wiley and the research that underpins DISC through all of the reports that leaders have done. And that profiling, the profile itself has some behavioural continuums. So from you get a point on a line where you will where you can measure yourself against. So if you are towards the right-hand side of the continuum, it means you're doing a good job. If you're at the left-hand side, you could probably do that behaviour a bit more. And the reason why you don't do it is probably because you don't have, you need a bit more energy to do that. And but what we do with those posters, they're huge posters. We get people with little post-it notes to map themselves where they are, and we encourage debate and discussion all the way through that day based on actual, real life data of where people are.
Yeah, that's great. Making it very interactive, very relevant. And as you say, all based on actually where their own dot is on that continua, which is all about best practice and best practice behaviours. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to have a quick look at some of the points here. I know Faisal has made a point here: include and refer to the model in all training materials that have to do with behaviours and communication styles. Absolutely, Faisal, all about integrating this in with everything that you're doing, and then it becomes, as you say, that common language, that common way of behaving, or that common approach to behaviour, I should say.
Yeah.
So let's move on now. And and talk about the 5 behaviours, because you just mentioned it and I cut you short. So I wanted to finish the keeping DISC alive. But you mentioned, and I know that you then went on to use the 5 behaviours. And just for people who haven't come across the 5 behaviours, the 5 behaviours of a cohesive team is a profiling model that is based on Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's a wonderful model for helping teams to evaluate where they are in terms of the 5 behaviours that are really going to help them become more cohesive. And then taking them through a process to help them, identify the areas that aren't working, and come up with action plans. So Alex, over to you.
So we wanted to have another way of embedding DISC and keeping DISC alive, and because 5 behaviours was underpinned by DISC, we felt that was a really nice way to do that. We also felt that it wasn't it could be pitched in such a way that teams didn't feel that they were bad necessarily, but it was teams understanding where they are on a journey, and whatever proactiveness they took to developing themselves together, they could be better teams and more cohesive teams. So we were able to pitch it in a way that, again, engaged people, that it was a proactive, positive way to develop, rather than a sort of reactionary intervention to a team that was dysfunctional.
Yeah, to fix something. Yeah,
to fix a problem. Yeah. So we had a team last year that had some relatively new team members, and then in March this year we rolled out 5 behaviours to that team. And 5 behaviours is very different to doing a DISC session. So again, it required a bit of prep. So I enlisted the help of our HR team to learn and understand that, and get myself and Paul set up to go and deliver this to one of our ops teams. And again, it was a really, really productive session. And because the ops guys had already got that understanding of DISC, they were able then to really connect with what the 5 behaviours reports were saying about their team interactions and their team behaviours, and how some of those behaviours were maybe not conducive or were supportive of getting them into a stronger place, with whether it was trust, whether it was the commitment that they had to the goals that they were setting, whether it was accountability, holding each other to account on some of those joint goals, and then finally the results. What results are the team going to deliver? And all the way through, the DISC model is supporting you, because it's giving you real life practical suggestions as to, if you do some more of this or some less of that, then you are more likely to move that forward and be successful in your goals. So
continuing that theme of adapting, flexing your style, adapting your style in order to achieve better outcomes, in order to connect better in a team setting, but in a much, much deeper way. So just before we dig into that a little bit more, I know that you and Paul came separately actually, but you both did our 5 behaviours familiarisation day.
Pardon me?
You both did our 5 behaviours of a cohesive team familiarisation day. You came over to Stafford.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And you did that day. What did you get from that day?
I think it was twofold. First of all, it was that introduction to the model and giving us a practical step-by-step guide through the model. So whilst it was an introduction to the day, because the 5 behaviours model can be delivered in a number of ways, it can be delivered over a day, 2 days, or 3 days. It just gave us enough insight into, again, deciding that was going to be the right thing to do to continue our DISC journey. So it was really helpful to help get clear in our minds that it was going to be the right solution, and make a practical difference to the teams that we wanted to work it with.
Yeah.
And then finally, we were doing activities on the familiarization session that were part of the delivery model, the pack that is available for it. And it was really helpful to have done those activities in the safe space of your familiarization session, so that when I came to do those in real life with the team, I just had a head start to what to expect, how to facilitate it sensitively. Teams are, sort of dynamic, continually sort of growing things with, and people are human. So they don't often set out to be destructive within a team, but for whatever reason, there could be some other things going on which are affecting people's behaviours. And coming back to the first behaviour, which is trust, there is a really insightful exercise called personal histories, which you can facilitate that in a number of ways. But having had the opportunity to go through it with you, Julie, was put us in a good place to do that in the right way, because it can go one of two ways if you don't facilitate it in the right way. So we thought, going through that was really helpful.
Yeah,
there are a couple of questions that have come up there. Just conscious that we got there.
Yeah, I'm conscious too, and I just wanted to say something about the personal histories exercise. And for those of you who've read Patrick Lencioni's book, he talks about the personal histories exercise, and as you say, massively stretching for the facilitator. Very, very important that the facilitator is facilitating it right. But it's an opportunity for people to really get to know each other. It's amazing how many people in organizations are sitting next to each other and yet don't really know each other, don't really know the things that are very important, the challenges that people have overcome in their lives. Yeah. And to get people talking at that level, the whole energy changes, everything changes. So, I'm absolutely with you there. So I just wanted to, a really good question from Tony here. We often refer to the 5 behaviours as being heavy lifting, and that it's really important that the team is up for heavy lifting. And Tony's asked that question, how up for the heavy reflection were the team?
They were, because we'd prepared them in the right way, and because we'd had the conversations with the team leader up front. So the director for that particular sector was brought in to the process. They understood what their part to play was and how they could support that that part of 5 behaviours, and for it to be a really open forum for the team to get to a place where they wanted to move forward. So I think as long as you do your prep right, and there is a great checklist in the pack which is available for you to go through to make sure you've set it all up properly. You've helped people understand what they need to do beforehand, and the place they need to be at personally before they come to the session. As long as we do that right, then I think that most teams will engage. And again, because they'd engaged fully with DISC, I don't think we didn't have to pull people into that session. They were already inquisitive as to what this was and how this could support them and help them as a team.
Yeah, brilliant. And great that you had that buy-in from the leader. We always say that's absolutely
valuable.
Essential. Absolutely essential. So I'm conscious of the time, and I'd like us to turn to...
There's another question here, Julie. We've missed it. Would you recommend doing everything DISC Workplace before the 5 behaviours session, or is this included in the 5 behaviours session? So you can do 5 behaviours independently. So there is if you do the 3-day session, you'll get an opportunity to explore DISC, but it will be a bite-sized introduction to DISC. So for us, and we took the approach to do DISC first, but that was because we didn't know about 5 behaviours. However, on reflection, I'd probably take that same approach. I think people having that in-depth understanding of their behaviour and how they operate and what they do and what they don't do can help them to resonate more quickly with the work that you do on 5 behaviours. So for me, I would do the workplace, the DISC first, and then follow it up with 5 behaviours.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Ideally, I mean, obviously not all organisations have got the luxury of being able to do that, but ideally, I would do that as well. And so one other question on the 5 behaviours, because we know that we can deliver it over 3 days, we can deliver it over 2 days, we can deliver it 1 day, and then maybe a month later, the second day, we can deliver it over half days, or we can actually deliver it over 1 day. So what was the structure for yourselves?
So we looked at it and felt that operationally it would be a challenge to get our teams out for 3 days, but equally we didn't want to overwhelm people with going through it all in 1 day, because it is a heavy program. So we took a decision to do it over 2 days, a week apart, so that the team were able to do that heavy lifting on day 1, which is the trust and the conflict session. Then they can go away and reflect, and they're still talking to each other as a team whilst they are field based, so they're all working in different patches of our business. They're still very aligned in terms of how they communicate and how they work together, so they were able to talk together in that week in between, and either understand each other a bit more, because you identify actions as well for each of those behaviours. So they were able to work on some of those actions in the interim, and then we followed it up a week later with the second day.
Fabulous. Yeah,
which culminates in them agreeing what their KPIs are at the end of it in terms of team results. Which I think is
fabulous. Yeah, that's a great model. So I'm realising we've got 8 minutes left, and I do want to explore with you what your plan is next. So what the what's next question.
Yeah.
Before I do that, though, just a quick question to wrap up the 5 behaviours. How did you feel about that as a facilitation? Because it is a very different type of program from the trainer's point of view, rather than, well, there's a lot of facilitation and coaching within that team. So how did you find that, Alex?
It was a challenge. I think that because it was the first time for me, although we'd done a trial run with our HR team. Again, the first time session is difficult, so it was a challenge. It was putting yourself into a different space with that team. I think trying not to get too involved in the and separating from some of the discussion and debate that's going on. So because I know them and I work with them, day to day, it could have been easy to have let myself get involved in some of that discussion, whereas actually you need to let the team work through some of those challenges. And it was about throwing in the questions at the right time, or challenging some of the thought, some of the areas that the discussion went into, that actually that might not be relevant, or you're going down a bit of a rabbit hole there. What about this? So I think sometimes, so it challenged me to make sure my questioning was spot on. But again, I can't say it enough. If you're able to, having somebody else there with you as a support, so it's not all you, being able to give each other that feedback at the end of the day, and being tuned in with the leader of that team as well. So at the at breaks and at the lunch and at the end of the day, how is the leader feeling about it? Does the leader think that we need to pitch it differently, or what does the leader want from it? So so I was very keen to make sure I was working effectively across the whole team and not just
fabulous. Really good job. And so Alex, in the last 5 minutes that we've got here, what's next?
There's more 5 behaviours, so we are looking at other teams within the organisation. So we'll schedule those in towards the end of the year. So we're coming up to summer holidays now for a lot of our business, and we'll do some work. We'll do some work towards the end of the year there with those teams. We're continuing to embed DISC So with new people who are joining our organisation, we are running mini catch-up sessions. So next week, I've got a disc management session with 10 managers from across our business. We're also looking at disc management as a solution for some of our top talent. So we do management development programs for our first line and junior managers, but also our top talent. So we're looking at how it can support those managers coming through our organisation, and bringing them into that disc culture, so that if their managers are discussing disc related things, then they're not feeling out of that loop. So it is a continual process for us, but it's continually looking at where we can realistically add it to what we do and keep it alive that way.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much. So I'm wondering if anybody in the last few minutes that we've got has got any other questions that you'd like to ask. Goodness me, Alex, you've been on quite a journey, and we were saying before the call, we were having a little bit of a catch up and saying that it's great to be able to do something like this and use a program like this to develop other people and at the same time develop yourself.
Absolutely.
Because I know that from that very first disc session where you said, oh God, it was a bit out of comfort zone and it was a bit challenging for you, look how far you've come. And it's all about the practice that you've had. It's about the gathering of experience and the kind of foundation that you're standing on now as a result of all of the disc sessions that you've run. So Tony's asked a question. If there was one suggestion to other trainers based on your experience, great question, Tony.
Brilliant question. I think just embrace it and go for it and do it, because there are lots of models out there, but for this particular model, it can be used in so many different contexts. So I think identify a context where you believe it's going to add the best value. Make it focused on behavior. So if you can link it into your values or your behaviors or your performance management process in some way, so that people are keeping it alive and are focused and are using it, then that's got to be beneficial to the business. But also embrace it yourself, because you'll learn a lot about yourself and about your own style, how you operate, and maybe we all have challenging relationships within our businesses, and it's been really helpful for me to look at those relationships and think, what can I do differently, but also then understanding perhaps where that style is coming from, that I can adapt my approach, or I can try something different. So professionally, it's really helped me, and also personally.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've been applying what you're teaching. I'm thinking, well, what does it mean for me in terms of my flexing? And that's so important for us as trainers, isn't it? Because every time we stand up in front of a group of people, we've got all the styles in the room, and it's about us being flexible as trainers and facilitators. So thank you so much. Michaela's just saying your talk was so rich, Alex. I lost the concept of time here. How long did the journey you describe here take?
Wow. We started off in September 2016. Was our initial contact with Julie. We then we did our training in January 17.
January 17.
First week of January. We then rolled out through March to June with our ops teams and our sales teams. We then did some follow-up in the autumn, and we then did 5 behaviours March this year. So yes, September 16 we started the journey, and it just feels like yesterday.
Yeah. And we've got a question here from Sue. Did you have any cynics or people who found this took them too far out of their comfort zone? And if so, how did you bring them on the journey? We talked about cynics and skeptics, I suppose, at the start. I don't know whether you were with us then Sue. We talked about that.
We had one or two people who challenged what their profile was saying, and I think it said more about their profile, their style within the profile. So when you go around the map and you look at some of the behaviours associated with C styles, which is challenge and cynicism and skepticism, that said more about their style than actually the report being inaccurate. So to bring them on the journey, it was taking them out of their comfort zone, but helping them to understand themselves, and I think pairing them up in the sessions so that they are chatting with people of an opposite style who might have a different insight into them, and they can give each other feedback, was really helpful to get them to associate with some of the behaviours that they might have been challenging. But there will always be one, and I think that that's fine. I say to everybody that it's okay to disagree with some of these styles, because we're all human and we are all different, and it's about the broad understanding of yourself and
it is, and that's a great approach to take, to be very permissive, to not try and fight anybody, but to use the information that's there to help people to grow and develop. Alex, thank you so much. I'm absolutely with Michaela. I got lost and absorbed in the time myself. There's so much information that you've shared, and it's been a real pleasure to speak to you. So thank you ever so much for joining. And we're now 2 minutes past 1, so I'm going to say thanks so much. Everybody's saying thank you.
Thank you.
And so, Alex, speak to you again soon.
Julie?
Yes?
I was just going to say, if anybody would like to contact me separately for any particular advice, happy to have any of those conversations. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn or whatever. But yeah, give me a shout if you need any.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's absolutely great. Well, I'm sure that people will do.
Cool.
And in the follow-up email that I send out with a recording of this, I'll just put your LinkedIn contact details with that very, very generous offer if anybody wants to have a further conversation with you or pick your brains about anything. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you very much,
Have
Julie.
a great day.
Pleasure. And you.
Bye now.